You're listening to the HR Mixtape, your podcast with the perfect mix of practical advice, thought-provoking interviews, and stories that just hit different so that work doesn't have to feel, well, like work. Now, your host, Shari Simpson.
Joining me today is Scott Tillema, corporate trainer and retired SWAT hostage negotiator with the Negotiations Collective. As an FBI-trained negotiator, Scott brings unique insights into high-stakes communication, negotiation strategies, and crisis leadership, helping HR professionals handle complex interpersonal dynamics confidently.
Scott, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me on the podcast.
Where else would I be? HR Mixtape is the place to be.
I love it. You have such a fascinating background, and I really want to focus on negotiation because that's something I think in the HR space we don't spend enough time on, from, talent acquisition and working from that perspective, as well as kind of negotiating the things that we want or the business objectives that we think are important. So what are some of the fundamental skills when it comes to negotiation that HR leaders really need to start adopting so that they can handle some of these critical conversations?
Right. Having a background in negotiation, I've realized that this is one of the most important skills you can have to find success. And negotiation is really almost a collection of smaller skills of communication, connection, conflict resolution, difficult conversations. And this is what HR is doing. HR is having difficult conversations all the time because part of it is your role, but part of it is the leaders and managers in the organization realize, we got a tough conversation we need to have. So let's push this over to HR, and you get dumped on with these tough conversations that others are having. So I think that when HR pros are learning about negotiation, they're getting stronger, finding more success, and getting better at their jobs because they're getting good at all the things you need to find success for an organization.
What do you think are some of the ways that HR can build trust in that conversation pretty quickly? Because, I've been in scenarios where I've had to have tough conversations with people, maybe going through a severance agreement. And there is that part of HR that has to stay legal, quote unquote, right? But also you want to have that humanity and trust when you're having these conversations.
Right. And for those of us outside of HR, let me tell you, HR is intimidating because usually you have power. You can put me on the PIP to EAP and you've got power over me. So I'm coming in to a meeting with HR already a bit concerned, a bit defensive. And I think that putting me on the same level, meaning you are listening to what I have to say, we are having a real conversation. It's not just a directed top to bottom conversation, goes a long way in allowing me to take a breath and realize that I'm going to be okay. Helping to understand what this conversation is about, putting that on the table really early can go a long way to say, all right, am I getting fired here? That's my biggest concern. No, we need to talk about performance, or we need to talk about an issue. And hearing what I have to say, listening, being curious can go a long way. People like to be heard.
Yeah.
And people always have an explanation for what they did. Maybe I was wrong in what I did or what I said, but let me help you understand the context. Well, why I did that? So being a good listener is foundational. And as a professional negotiator, that was one of the first things that we were taught, to be an active listener, to learn the 8 skills of active listening. And your power is information and options. How can I get that if I'm not listening to the person that I'm speaking with?
Yeah, that's such a good point that I've often seen HR professionals not take that listening approach. And it does go a long way. You've had to have some intense hostage negotiation type experiences in your career. How did you leverage emotional intelligence in those moments? And what can we learn from that as HR pros?
I think that we all need to understand that we are emotional people. That's what makes us uniquely human. We don't have to be embarrassed that we're emotional. We don't have to try to hide that we're emotional. Sometimes we're told, leave your emotions at the door. Let's keep it professional. But how do we separate ourselves from our emotions? And that's tough to do. So first of all, realize that emotion is normal. It's natural. It's okay. And if we can recognize the emotion that somebody else is feeling and know how that feels and can connect with them on that level, that goes a long way to tell me I'm not alone. I'm not weird for feeling this negative thought right now. There's nothing wrong with me. This is totally rational. It's totally normal. It's okay to feel that. And let's use emotion in the conversation rather than let's be logical, use, thought, reason, and very linear. Emotion is okay. So emotional intelligence starts with the idea of we are emotional and that's okay.
How did you learn to separate your own emotional reactions in a scenario? And what I mean by that is yes, we have to use emotion, we have to be empathetic, and we have to be personable. But there are scenarios where you kind of take that on internally, and that can really throw off your ability to negotiate and stay level-headed. What are some tactics that you use to kind of keep yourself grounded?
Right. And the great negotiators practice this all the time because when we get into these tough conversations, we're going to be feeling it.
Yeah.
There's going to be things done or said that are going to trigger us in different ways. So I think the best negotiators are very comfortable and very experienced. And this is practicing our difficult conversations and our skill building all the time. People say, well, how do I practice active listening skills? Next time a scammer calls you up and wants to steal your credit card information, you are not allowed to hang up the phone until you go through the 8 skills of active listening. And you're going to practice with somebody and you're going to laugh about it in the end because they're trying to steal your credit card or get you to wire money, but it's just another opportunity to practice these skills. So if we get good at doing this routinely, when it counts, this is going to be another routine, something that I do regularly. It's familiar. It's not, I'm going back to the class, checking the spreadsheet, checking the PowerPoint and figuring out, all right, what's the technique I use here? This is just who you are because you are so good at it. It goes from something you know to a skill that you have to who you are. And then it becomes very natural. And when you're that good at it, you can really be present with the person because you're not checking your notebook. What do I need to say here? You can be very present because I'm so good at this. What I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, when I'm going to say it. And that's when you form some powerful connections.
I love the idea of practicing with a spam caller because they don't know what's happening and it's really good for you. And you don't have to have that necessarily awkward feeling because you're never going to see this person again. They're not probably going to call you again because at the end of that conversation, they're going to be so annoyed. But you know what I mean? Such a good idea.
And you win and then you win again. And
right.
I think you can get through that in 3 to 5 minutes if you're pretty skilled. And very naturally, you can practice all these skills.
Yeah.
And then you get to hang up on them.
Right. I love that. What are some of the most common mistakes that you've seen people and or HR make during some of these high stakes negotiations?
People who don't manage themselves first become very problematic. I think the most important thing in our mind has to be, what is my goal here? What am I trying to accomplish? We get sidetracked from that, and that's where things go wrong because it becomes about me. It becomes about my need to be right. It becomes about my ego. And if we can set aside those things and be very focused, my goal of this conversation is to achieve this. Then when somebody calls you a name or critiques you about this or says something horrible about your organization or your team, we can let them know your feedback's important and I'd like to hear more about that. But in this conversation right now, we need to have a discussion about this. So people are very, very skilled at sidetracking others. And the reason is because it works. I can get you off your game. We're talking about something else. Now, all of a sudden, I'm a victim here and we've forgotten completely what we're talking about. Let's stay focused very clearly. Write it down at the top of your piece of paper. What is my goal here? What's the purpose of this conversation, this negotiation? And if we can stay focused on that, we're going to find more success.
I find that very true in my career. I once had... it was a family-owned company, so it was a family member who came in my office. They were upset about something, and they were screaming. I mean, losing their mind on me. And I was like, I almost word for word, I was like, I really do want to hear what you have to say, but this is not appropriate, and we're not going to have this conversation while you're yelling at me. So if you need to take a minute, that's great. If we want to schedule a meeting later in the day, that's also fine. I do want to hear you, but this is not the way to do it.
Right. And you're demonstrating to them that this tactic, and it's a tactic, is not going to work. Pressure is not going to work. We are going to have this conversation. And if truly this isn't the right time, I want to make sure that it's right for you. But now they have to realize, all right, well, that didn't work.
Right.
I'm going to either have to try something else or at some point going to need to sit down with you and allow you to lead us through that conversation.
Yeah. Which can be a very tough thing, I think, for HR professionals who are maybe even newer in their career and they're not used to that kind of really heightened emotion that sometimes our employees give us.
Right. No one is coming to HR because it's a wonderful, easy day. We're having a barbecue, serving some ice cream. HR just want to let you know things are really good. HR is getting involved when things are tough. And I think that's why there's such a similarity and interest in my work as a hostage negotiator, because people won't call us on a good day. We exclusively have tough conversations.
Yeah.
And that's what you and your teams are doing.
Yeah. Have you, as you've gone through this experience in your life, what are maybe some of the mistakes you made early on that we could learn from to not make ourselves?
Yeah, and there's many of them, of course. But I've learned that under stress and under pressure, we behave a little bit differently. And how we communicate is how we make people feel. And so often people say, well, prepare for your difficult conversation. So you're preparing your points of what you're going to say. And people will do this if they're preparing. They're going to write down, here's the point I need to make. Here's the next point. But how many people practice the delivery of what they're saying? So you're thinking about what you're going to say, but nobody sits down and practices how they're going to say it. Because how we communicate with others, first of all, and how we choose to, whether it be text message, phone call, in person, Zoom, that matters. But the delivery is the rate, the rhythm, the pressure, the volume, the tone of our conversation. And each one of these things can be adjusted. And when we're doing a real negotiation with lives on the line, I've got a coach sitting right across from me that is watching each of these different areas of delivery, making sure that my delivery is just right. Hey, let's slow it down a little bit. Let's take down the volume. That's kind of tough to do in a real conversation in the boardroom, but this is where we have to practice.
Yeah.
To say, I'm mindful of this delivery, because our delivery impacts how people feel about us. We're not making decisions so much about what's being said, but how it's being said. I'm going to remember how you made me feel. And you make me feel a certain way by your delivery. So I would challenge people to practice your delivery. And I didn't do that early on nearly enough. And when I was getting the coaching is, are you aware of how fast you're talking? You're creating anxiety because you're speaking so quickly. Say, okay, I didn't realize how I was delivering this. So know that under stress and under pressure, we're going to behave differently. So let's practice not what's being said, but how we're going to say it.
Yeah.
And this minor little adjustment that anyone can do is going to have really positive impacts on our interactions.
I realized this was several years ago. We do a lot of video recording at Paylocity, and I was being recorded for a clip we were using internally. And I got to preview the clip before, they cut it up. And I didn't realize that when I think that the facial expression I was making, it was terrible. It was so bad. And so I wouldn't have known that. And it was definitely something I've had to work on now. Like when I'm speaking and I'm thinking, it's like I have to be very cognizant of what my face is doing, because I don't want somebody to misinterpret what's happening.
Right. The nonverbals are huge.
Yeah.
And we don't have any awareness of the nonverbals when we're in such tough conversations. But I think this leads to another important point of, you are coaching yourself by watching this. How many people don't like getting feedback? They don't like getting coaching because they feel that they're being attacked. They feel that someone's being too critical of me. Again, what is my goal here? To be my very best negotiator self.
Yeah.
So I should be asking for this all the time. Hey, could I have some feedback on this next talk I give? Could I have a feedback on this conversation, on my leadership style? Because it's about being the very best we can be, not about my feelings in the moment.
Yeah, for sure. What role do you think silence plays in an effective negotiation?
Oh, it's great. It's great. This is the best. And people don't ever use it. It's one of the 8 skills of active listening. And what silence can do is one of two things. If you are listening to somebody, your power is information and options. By being silent, you are opening the door for them to continue talking. People are uncomfortable in silence and they want to fill it. If I want to be a great listener, all I need to do is be quiet and allow them to fill it. So that's a great one. But also with silence, it can draw attention. And politicians have this figured out pretty nicely. If I get up to the microphone and I hold in silence for a few seconds, all of a sudden everybody's listening in. They want to know what's going on. And I think this is actually more effective virtually than in person, because virtually, if you hold silence when you're supposed to talk, you've got everyone's attention.
Yeah.
They just think their internet went down. They're checking the they don't know what quite happened.
Right.
and now you can powerfully deliver it. And I think the powerful messaging comes when you have people's attention, and silence can go a long way of bringing that in.
Well, and you see that in those really great keynote speakers that they do have these long pauses, and they'll make a point and then they'll pause and they'll kind of let the audience think about it. So what a great tactic to bring into negotiations for sure.
You have to.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of silence.
Oh, I love that. So if you're very, very new to this and you haven't done this before, what are some of the first steps an HR practitioner should take to, is there a book they should read? Is there what are the first steps you think for them to really start to push themselves in this skill?
And I think that committing to learning, and whatever that looks like, if you are a book reader, there's great books on hostage negotiation. Never Split the Difference is probably one of the most popular negotiation books out there. So that might be a good book to pick up. But there's podcasts that you can listen to. Negotiate Anything is the #1 negotiations podcast in the world. Negotiation Ninja. There's a couple good ones out there. If you're a podcast person, there's TED Talks out there. There's great videos. But to say, I am going to commit to being great at this, and that could be 5 or 10 minutes a day. And all of us have 5 or 10 minutes a day. So the first step is a personal commitment. I'm going to be good at this. So it starts with building that knowledge. Then it moves into skill building. Are we going to practice some of the things we learn? Go from knowledge to skill building, and people are going to notice.
Right.
And that is going to put jet fuel on what you're doing. Because when people commit to being better listeners, better communicators, better negotiators, better conflict resolvers, people love that.
Yeah.
Because they want to be heard. They love that connection. And I've never had someone come back to me who's been in my class to say, hey, Scott, I've been working hard on what you're teaching around negotiation and communication. And you know what? People don't like it. They don't like that I listen to them. They don't like I'm connecting with them deeply. People are going to notice. They're going to love it. And that's a huge piece of encouragement to keep going.
Yeah. As we wrap up our conversation, my last question for you is, as the workplace has started to really evolve in hybrid environments and fully remote, how does that potentially change how HR should be approaching some of these critical conversations?
I think that acknowledging sometimes there is a disconnection when we're not physically close, that there is power in being physically close. So if we can have those opportunities, let's use that. But acknowledge, because we're in a remote situation, because I'm 100, 1,000 miles away, I just want to have some dedicated time that you and I can connect. I want to check in. I want to hear how you are doing. What are you challenged with? What do you need? Because I'm not there to directly observe it, I'm going to rely a little bit more on your self-report. So I think that it's more important that we get more time, both about the tasks at hand and specifically the technical things that we're doing, but also the whole person.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that you have what you need from me, because people don't quit their jobs. They quit their leaders. They quit their boss. And if I come in and have a feeling my boss cares about me, my HR team is concerned about the resources, the humans in the company, how much more connected would I be? And if I could share with you, here's what I really need. Here's what my concerns are. What training can we bring? How can we partner together to make this better? Wow. Now I'm not alone. Now I'm not looking for the new job. Now I'm not quiet quitting. I feel like part of the team. I feel supported. So let's take that time and have these real connections.
Yeah, Scott, such great advice. Thanks for sitting down with me for a couple minutes.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can find show notes and links at thehrmixtape.com. Come back often and please subscribe, rate, and review.